Thank you. Okay, so I sold my company 2 months ago. I haven't really talked about it with anybody. I don't necessarily have any insights on that yet. And when I was just thinking about what I wanted to share with you guys, I really just had kind of a brainstorm session and figured out that there were kind of 3 things that I thought an audience like you guys might like to take away from the 7 years that I had building and running Storenvy essentially by myself. So it's all things that I screwed up, but then eventually, figured out how to get right. Things in venture capital and creating a marketplace, and then just building a company or an organization. Okay, just like any American, we love selfies. So wanted to give you guys some of those. If you want to follow me or get in contact with me, you can just tweet me or whatever, Snapchat me. Okay, Storenvy is a product that's 2 things glued together. It's e-commerce storefront builder and then also a marketplace. So this is the marketplace. This is our homepage. This actually came second because what it started out with was this storefront builder thing. So we have over 100,000 of these where like individuals can set up their own online store and they can sell anything they want. It's not just one product category. You can do t-shirts, art. You can be a band selling CDs because people actually still do that. And you name it, and it looks like your own website. It lives at your own URL, and then anything you put into your storefront is also on our marketplace. Like I said, we have over 100,000 stores when I left. I'm sure that's gone up since then. And we've always focused on indie retailers. So people ask us if we're like Etsy, and I didn't even really know about Etsy when I started it. We focus more on small boutique class businesses, and so that's worked really well. As she mentioned, I got kicked out of Y Combinator on the first day, and I'll try to only share that story briefly because there's blog posts and news articles about it and whatnot. Essentially, I didn't really know I was starting a startup when I started the code for this project. So I'm a Ruby on Rails engineer. I've been writing code for like 10 years, Rails code for 10 years, and a designer, and I just had built a whole bunch of online stores for small businesses when I lived in Kansas City, and I had the idea with the guy that I was sort of doing design with that what if there was a way to press a button and set one of these up automatically instead of having to pay me $10,000 to build you something from scratch. This was 2008, so there weren't well-known tools yet. And so I started working on it, and we were trying to be creative of how we could fund the thing, and he knew a thing or two about t-shirt printing. And we saw that there was a bunch of bands and clothing companies that were going to want to use our product, and so we decided to start this thing called Storenvy Printing that was basically bands and t-shirt companies would place orders for like large quantities of t-shirts with us, and we would email the order to somebody else, and they would print it. We'd keep 25% and not have to really do anything except write emails. And we ended up making really good money to be able to sustain and fund the business while I single-handedly was building out this giant product for over a year, working 100 hours a week. And I kind of accidentally got introduced through a chain of events to Paul Graham and the people at Y Combinator, and they invited me, well, us, but there really wasn't an us. I flew out to San Francisco to meet with Paul, and I was in his backyard, and he built Yahoo Stores, which is how he kind of made his money to be able to become an investor. And so he was fascinated because they'd never funded a store builder before, yada, yada, yada. We get invited without applying to be a part of YC, and I start thinking, like, I've been hanging out, I've been working with this designer and this t-shirt printing guy that know nothing about tech, they know nothing about startups, they're in Orlando, and we've been working remote. And so I just realized, like, those guys should take the t-shirt printing. I'll go out and do YC because I've got all the technical skills, and I've also gotten us into this incubator. And it was a good business decision, but showing up on the first day without these co-founders that he'd actually never met or even interacted with in any way pissed them off, and so they decided that they weren't going to fund us after I'd already moved all the way to San Francisco, put everything in storage, signed a summer lease and all that. And they didn't give us any money or anything. They just said sorry, but not sorry. And so that was like the biggest defeat I've ever experienced. And, particularly because I had gotten rid of my revenue for my company in an effort to do this. And so suddenly now I had this website that was launched, and we had probably about 1,000 stores on the platform, and they were processing probably about $100,000 a month, and but we weren't taking any commission, so I had no revenue. I had a product, but no co-founders, no funding, and kind of a panic attack. And so I was in my hotel room by the airport in San Francisco, just considering all kinds of horrible options, like moving back to Oklahoma City to live with my mom. I thought about getting a job at PayPal because I had worked with PayPal a lot, which if you had to stack rank moving in with your mom and working at PayPal, it's tough to decide which one's worse. Sorry, PayPal. And so, but finally just decided, screw it, I didn't ever plan to live in San Francisco. In fact, I didn't like it the one other time I had visited. And just said, this is the place where I'm going to rebuild this thing if I'm going to do it. So I decided to write out this 3-month lease and went back to coding. I negotiated a deal where I kind of got the old t-shirt printing guys to pay for me to keep the servers on and pay for my rent while I kept this thing going for a few months in exchange for my shares in the t-shirt thing. And ended up building more product, creating a fantastic network of just young Mission District San Francisco entrepreneurs. We all lived very close to each other, and built more stuff. Luckily, it's funny, in business, the craziest things are make or break. And in this case, my landlord was trying to get a building permit for the apartment that I was in, and he couldn't get it. And so I kept getting a 1-month extension on my lease. And 3 months turned into 5 months, turned into 6 months, and I got the guts to try to actually raise a proper seed round. And I went out trying to raise $750,000 and was able to raise $1.5 million in 3 weeks from 4 of the top VCs in Silicon Valley. And the trick there was these guys are thinking, well, if he did all this without any money and now has 2,000 stores and all this product, and he got kicked out of YC and he's still going for it, what would happen if we gave him money? We want to see what that looks like. And I don't think I messed it up too bad, but I did screw some stuff up. So let's talk about what you guys can do to not screw some of this stuff up. Oh, I got this guy, I forgot. Screwing up capital. How many people have raised money or hope to raise money? Well, not everybody. Very interesting. Well, so let's talk about the first mistake, the first thing that a lot of people screw up when it comes to funding their business. Raising capital at all. For most people, you shouldn't raise VC. This has been written about a lot, but I wanted to tell you, as somebody who raised VC, it is a mistake for most people to put their focus on that. It feels really cool because like you get a TechCrunch article and people think you're rich now even though it's not your money. But the truth is that you are put on a different trajectory than most businesses that have ever existed and been successful in all of society. In fact, what you have to do is you have to make decisions that are strategically bad for the long term in order to spike short-term growth. You know, most business decisions are not, most things that you have to do to please investors involve getting to like 5x annual growth. Well, most healthy businesses don't grow 5x year over year. That's crazy, but that's what investors want to see. So you have to make these absurd decisions and spend money in ridiculous ways and even sacrifice the long term in order to get this kind of growth. And it's not sustainable and it's destructive for a lot of businesses. So raise money as a last resort. If you are able to fund the business through actual customers and revenue, that is much, much preferred. Don't get jealous of people that raise money because now they have a boss. And more importantly, never, ever compare yourself to the strategy or the trajectory of another business. Just play your own game. Win at your own game instead of trying to win at somebody else's game. But if you're going to do it, because you're going to do it, you're not going to listen, you're going to want to know all this stuff. How to make 6 slides. I love making slides. How to close the killer deal. Well, I'm not going to tell you how to do this because it's been written about a lot, but what I can tell you is the best things that I've ever learned about any of this stuff were all written when I was fundraising at the end of 2010. And it's these 2 items right here. One of them is a blog post by now CEO of Uber, Travis Kalanick, who when I met him in 2010 was just an angel investor, and he'd done some other companies, but he was not driving cars at the time. That's an amazing article that goes through all kinds of bullet points. It's a step-by-step guide of how to get a seed round put together. One of the biggest ones is this idea of creating false scarcity or false momentum, making the investors feel like if they don't say yes now, then they're going to miss the deal. So often we're sort of waiting for emails back or waiting for somebody else to give us permission. And he walks through basically how to make it look like they're going to miss the deal. Because the scariest thing in the world for investors is to say no or not move fast enough on an Airbnb or an Uber. And all of them have horror stories about doing that. Some of my investors said no to Instagram, and they're willing to put a little bit of money in so that they don't potentially miss that deal and have to live with that forever. The second one is, so AngelList started out first as a blog called Venture Hacks, and they made a PDF called Pitching Hacks, clever, and this PDF outlines like exactly what you should include in your slide deck, how you should craft an elevator pitch, all the practical stuff. And it's still fantastic. When I help people put together their investor stuff, I still go back to this. It's really good. And I used just these 2 things and put $1.5 million round together when $1.5 million was actually a lot back then. So once you've decided to raise money, you are forever married to your investors. Hopefully, Sean Parker won't make you dress up like you're in Lord of the Rings, but you're married to them for the whole rest of the company's life. And what you've got to do is make sure when you select investors. So the funny thing is you're spending all your time trying to get these people to say yes. But the truth is that you need to also be deciding if you want them to say yes or if you want to say yes. Because once you're married to them, you've got problems around getting them to keep investing. So if you land the biggest, most badass VC in the world to fund your company, the risk that you run there is they have all these other amazing companies in their portfolio that you're competing against. Because seed stage companies, or seed stage VCs, look at their deals like science experiments. So they're funding a whole bunch of these guys just to see which one or two are going to pop and be really exciting. Well, that's fine. There's other investors out there. Once you need more money, you can always go back. Well, the thing is investors will look at the deal and say, wait, you raised money before, and these guys aren't funding you again? What's going on there? These guys are really close to your business. They should know it better than anybody else. Well, it's called what's it called? Yeah, it's called signaling risk. So you get signaling risk from your existing investors, and it happens all the time, and it kills companies. So you run out of money, and you're dead because your existing investors won't put more money in. And then a second thing that you need to be figuring out, and again, nobody does this because they're just dying to get somebody to give them the money, is do they understand your strategy? So they may love the fact that you're doing, a marketplace for shoes, but they don't understand that you are using this crazy user adoption thing that's going to take a year and a half to figure out, and they're going to be ticked off that we don't see this growth chart going like this. Are they on board with how you're going about your growth strategy? And the last thing, are they good board members? These two kind of go together because they're going to be sitting in board meetings with you. I personally think it is just a crazy idea that the investors are the same as the board members, but that's the world we live in. So you're going to be sitting at a table with these guys making strategic business decisions with your investors for the entire life of the company. And you got to make sure that not only do you want their money, but you actually want their brains and you want to be married to them. I think it was Groucho Marx that said, I never want to be a member of a club that would allow me as a member. And there's something along the lines of raising capital that's like that, where sometimes we kind of know we're full of shit in the things that we're saying, and then as soon as you get somebody to agree to give you money, you're like, you're dumb, man. So the idea that I know entrepreneurs have gotten people to invest in ideas that they themselves didn't believe in the long term. And so you got to make sure that you're getting people that are buying into you for the same reasons that you believe in you, not in some other wacky scenario or some metric that they interpreted the wrong way, because it really does happen all the time. All right, moving on from this, because you guys have probably heard a lot about raising money. Building your company. So most people, when they're starting out, they're just building their product. And that's what I was doing. I was just building a product. I never dreamed that when I started writing the code for Storenvy originally, that I would be worrying about HR and picking an accountant or shopping for office space or doing org charts. I didn't even think about that, and I'm not even sure I would have signed up for that. But once you're an entrepreneur, and especially if you raise money and you have to grow, you're now building an organization instead of just a product. So your goal is actually to build an organization that will build your product. This is a very, very big shift for a lot of people who are good at the actual craftsmanship of a product. And it's not the same job, and it's oftentimes not the same people. So where you have to get to is putting yourself out of a job across every functional role that you have ever been doing. So when I was running Storenvy at first, I was not only doing the code and a lot of the design, but I was doing the customer support, I was doing the Twitter and the Facebook and the branding and the writing and all that stuff. And so then when I got people on my team that I worked really hard, I hired badasses, but they weren't really that happy because I was still the in-house expert on how to do every single thing. And so they were kind of walking into almost like a minefield where I had a 2-year head start on thinking through like design problems that they were excited to solve, but I could specifically tell them why all their ideas wouldn't work because I'd already thought of them. And I was too much of an expert on too many things, so I wasn't training people how to be just as good as I would have been or better, and giving them the tools and then getting out of their way. So a really good illustration for this is this box that an executive coach gave me one time. It's called the Johari window. Not important. So this is spectrum for all skills. So you're either your skills are either conscious or unconscious, and you're either competent or incompetent. Hopefully competent at the things that your company is doing. Well, if you've ever listened to somebody teach, they have at least consciousness about the skill. Maybe they don't know how to do it themselves, but they at least know how to do it. And then, of course, there's a lot of people that maybe are a great guitar player, but they don't know how to be a guitar teacher. So their skills are just unconscious. They just kind of go for it. Here's another example. So like skateboarding. Conscious competence would say, I'm a great skateboarder, and I can explain my technique. I know what makes me good. Then you've got unconscious competence about skateboarding, which is like, I'm a great skateboarder, but I just kind of do it, and I don't really know like how I'm good. A lot of amazing people, athletes, artists, all kinds of stuff, just do it, but they don't even really know what makes them good. That's very common. And this third one is, I suck at that, but I know how it works. Like I know skateboarding, but I'm just not a good skateboarder. And then the last one is, I just don't really know anything about skateboarding. This is your goal, to go from unconscious competence to conscious competence. If you think about it, if you're a designer, if you're an engineer, do you understand your own process? Do you understand how you problem solve, or where you start debugging, or how things move from idea to final product in your mind? Because I really didn't. And many of the makers that I've dealt with that have turned into founders don't know their process either. And what happens is that you end up marginalizing your own team because you're the keeper of the magic crystals, and only you have seen the crystal ball and can really make important decisions that are on brand. And it really burns people out and makes them feel like they're not adding value to the company. So as you move from unconscious to conscious, you go from being a founder to a CEO or an executive. This goes for, I would recommend people document their process from everything from, design and engineering, but all the way over to, like culture. Like, how do we act? How do you work? What is it like to work here? How do you work here? Brand. How does the brand speak? What do we stand for? What do we never compromise on? These are things that when you're sitting next to people all day, you think it kind of like rubs off on them, but it just doesn't, because they're like deep in the JavaScript or whatever it is, and they need reminding of sort of how the company operates and how they think, so that they can become better than you ever were at what you've hired them to do. Another big one that people don't think about is what they want to do when the company has an organization. So if it's you and 3 guys and you're the CEO, you're still doing a lot of other stuff. You might be doing design, sales, engineering, whatever it is, and that's not going to last. In fact, you're in bad shape if you're still doing sales when you have an organization on your hands. And so you need to really get clear in your own mind what role you want to perform, and then get out of everybody's way on everything else. This sounds very obvious, but unless you're intentional about it, it's very easy to micromanage a lot of areas of your business if you started out really on your own, working from square one and then tried to hire people underneath an established product. And then just kind of a piece of advice, if you can afford it, if you've raised money, get an executive coach. It's a really great investment. This is somebody that you'll meet with probably once a week for an hour, and they'll be a sounding board for you without, having to tell your investors what's really going wrong every day or every week. They'll be somebody that has a lot of experience with that organizational design and organizational leadership and can like help you manage conflict within the organization. I had a lot of amazing interactions with my executive coach, and I think I might have gotten the Johari window thing from him. So, if you're into that, if you're into clip art, then get an executive coach. All right, and so then the last big chunk here is marketplace stuff, and this is my main area of experience. And wait, how many people have a marketplace? Okay, decent amount, good. I met with some good marketplaces earlier today. So the chicken and egg problem. This is something that people, everybody wrestles with. If you don't know what it is, it means that you don't have any customers yet. But even if you did, there's nothing for them to buy, and you don't have any sellers yet, but even if you did, there's nobody buying. So why would either side show up? Why would either side list their stuff if there's no one to buy? Why would I shop there if there's nothing to buy? The classic marketplace conundrum, chicken and egg problem. So we did a couple of things that worked really well, and some of them were on purpose, and some of them were on complete accident, and it's usually the accidents that work better. So we kind of hacked the supply generation, and we did that by having those online stores. So it started out as a store builder where things would live at your own URL, and what I was doing was selling, oh, did I not go forward? There we go. What I was doing was, the value we were providing was software, not customers. So the value we were providing was a website builder where these t-shirt designers or bands or whatever they were already wanted a website, and they weren't coming to us expecting sales. They were coming to us expecting an online presence, and they were going to bring their own customers. And so we gave that away for free as kind of a Trojan horse to be able to get enough supply into the network to then monetize through another channel. So the way that applies to everybody is figure out a way to create some value for your supply side that is outside of demand. So if it's a service that they want, I know some guys doing an e-commerce platform, marketplace type thing, and they offer just general inventory management for the sellers to where they're running their whole business, even the offline part, through this piece of software. And that gives people an incentive to sign up and start using it even before the customers are there. And that way, when you kick your marketplace on, you've already got a significant critical mass of stuff. Very important. And then demand gen, another smart thing we did. This one was less on purpose. When you check out from Storenvy on a custom store, it could be mycoolstuff.com. As you go check out, the checkout flow asks you to make a Storenvy account. And that was so that we could keep track of who was doing what and send you receipts and stuff like that. But what it ended up doing was a whole bunch of people just signed up as customers, and a portion of those people would sign up as merchants. So we ended up getting this amazing viral loop of signups both on the supply and demand side of the business, all through just people promoting their own store, which is going to happen. The supply side, because we had this standalone thing, we're using that to promote their store, which in turn gave us customers and more merchants. So if you can figure out a way to get your supply to actually do your customer generation for you, you don't have to spend as much on marketing, and it has an exponential growth capacity versus you having to spend $1 to get $2 out. Second one, this happens a lot in marketplaces, and I don't know why. I think it's because people spend a bunch of time on the content of what's being sold, but you need to have a brand and a voice, and you need to stand for something and have a manifesto, and you need to tell people why they're shopping there versus getting that same stuff on another network. Some people do this great, and then some people are just here's cool stuff, buy it. And they don't necessarily communicate the vision and the feeling and all that stuff. The key is, why should I come back? Because so oftentimes you'll land on something on Google, and then you buy it because it was like a cool pin or a t-shirt or whatever it was, but then you're like on their mailing list again, and you don't even really remember what that website was, and you know, you don't become a repeat customer of the marketplace itself because you don't really know what it stands for in the universe. So get clear in your own heads, like, what is the problem you're solving in my life, not just what product are you selling to me, and communicate that to me over and over and over and over. Why should I sell here instead of all the other places that I can sell? You got to communicate to your merchant side. And then, why should I come back here to shop? Like, I know this sounds really simple, but you have to communicate this to people over and over and over and over for them to really start getting it. Another thing I see is that people really want, like, the community to self-regulate, and we'll put reviews on the site, and, you know, the best stuff will rise to the top over time because the community will push out the bad players. Terrible idea, because that means that the first customers on your network, the people that took that risk on you, are going to have a worse experience than the people that come later. Those are the people that are hopefully going to turn around and start telling people about you. But so often we don't put any rules in place because we don't want to introduce friction, and we want as much growth as possible in the short term. You've got to control the initial customer experience. So, things like ratings and whatnot are great, but I think you should actually look at every single seller that becomes a part of your network before they go live in the early days. Because what you're doing is you're setting a tone of trust for your customers, and you have got to make these first people's experience just mind-blowing, so they're going to tell other people about it. And one thing that we didn't do early enough, and I still don't think they've done it well, it's still not done well on Storenvy, is having specific guidelines of behavior for every merchant. So, like, you don't have to include a tracking number. You don't have to necessarily mark an order as shipped from when you ship it. And so sometimes people's order is like awaiting shipment forever, and it never says shipped. Well, there's no punishment in the network for that, and then people have this weird experience where in the world we live in today, people expect an Amazon experience from every single e-commerce experience that they have. And you've got to get as close to that as possible. And when you set these guidelines for good behavior for your supply side, they fall in line. They'll do it because they want to be successful. They're actually looking for coaching. It's not that they're like jerks and don't like shipping things on time or giving good communication with the customer. They're just amateurs, and they don't necessarily know what you have to do in order to provide a good customer experience. So you guys need to create rules and force them to abide by them. Trust is the number one thing with your customers. If they don't trust their first experience, then they're not going to come back. Don't put off your monetization. Growth is so important. Like, we got to grow. We don't want to charge anybody because it'll slow down growth. Bad idea. You got to charge for the value you create. Like, Facebook could get away with that because their business model, first of all, they're Facebook. Don't compare yourself to Facebook ever. Second, their business model was separate from the core product that we were all using before they were an ad network. But for most marketplaces, you're going to end up charging for that thing that you're already doing. So don't give it away for free and then later on we'll start charging, because your customers, your merchants will start thinking of your value and your service as worthless. And you can never change that. Imagine if Craigslist started charging us all to post anything. Like, I'm pretty sure the usage rate would go way down, because to me, it's just a classified ad and it's basically worthless. Well, we did that at Storenvy, and it was not good. So we gave away the marketplace sales and the storefront sales for too long in an effort to get growth going, because that's what the board members wanted to see. And then when we introduced our revenue model on the marketplace side, where we take 10% of marketplace sales, we really got bit in the ass, and people thought we were being greedy, and they thought that we were already making a lot of money, because how else would we have been in business for years without charging them? And so then when we took 10%, there was a massive uproar, revolt, and people left the platform, and we had to work to get some of them back. This one is the scariest one. Metrics. I personally hate metrics, but they're the absolute truth of what's going on in your business. And I'm going to show you the 3 that matter for like almost every marketplace. So we need to talk about what value we're really delivering to these people. It's oftentimes not just sales. And it's because, if they already had their own website and they wanted sales, they could run ads or something. That's not your unique value. The number one thing that you're providing to your supply side is liquidity. What a businessy word. Liquidity. It's kind of fun to say, actually. But let's say you only have 10 merchants right now. You might be thinking, we got to get more people, we got to get more merchants on here, we got to get more customers, and maybe 10's a little low. Let's say 100. You have 100 merchants. How many of those merchants are being successful on your network so far? Do you have a product? Do you have a mechanism? Is your company working for those 100 merchants? Or are you going, no, we just need to get a lot more people and then it'll work? Focus on making the current users that you already have as successful as possible, and make sure that that product flow actually works for those people before you think about, spending 50 grand on an ad thing to just dump more people in the top of the funnel. Are people are the supply side sticking around for a long time because they're actually being successful? How many people are potentially making a living on your product? Like, monitor that, not just the number of people that have signed up or have launched or whatever, but the people who are actually being successful using the tool. 2, repeat purchase rates. You might be doing crazy month-over-month sales volume growth, but is it all new people? Are you actually getting people to buy in to the philosophy and the brand and the vision and the ideas of your marketplace, or are you just putting new people on top over and over and over? Most places are just putting new people on top over and over and over. Most of the things that we think, that have launched in the last year that we think are so cool, that have these big growth rates, are just doing all top of the funnel new user sign up, and it's not snowballing with like long-term engagement. And what you should do is create a graph, a cohort analysis, if you want to get real nerdy here, a cohort analysis of behavior every month. If you signed up in January, what is the lifetime value, and over how many months do they stay a customer, and watch that graph mapped month over month over month to see how you're doing improving that number, because that will tell you the real, like, down and dirty, does your product work for customers? Because you can't continue to do new customers at the top of the funnel forever. Number 3, this one's real in the weeds, but super important. New customer merchant connections. How many people have you introduced? Because just because you are making a lot of sales doesn't mean that your marketplace is necessarily doing its job of discovery. Perhaps these people already had a bunch of customers and just switched over to your website. But are you actually able to say that when somebody joins your network that they're going to get new customers? So, you might look at the data and be like, well, really, people only buy from like one guy. That's the average, is like every customer only buys from one merchant. And that gives you the sense that, you don't really have a network. You don't have a network yet. But what you want to do is be able to say, on average, somebody will buy from 4 or 5 or 10 or whatever it is, and that becomes this gravity for your space where sellers want to be there, because then they can get discovered by the existing customers that are already there. And then, just to get a little touchy-feely, I want to get into some work-life balance. because I did this by myself for 7 years, and man, it'll eat you alive. And especially when you're by yourself, because everything depends on you. You have all these people's salary. You have all these, investor expectations. You have your identity and your reputation, and you don't want to let anybody down. And so you end up putting everything on the line and getting burnt out. I can tell you that, like, when I was like getting ready to, when I was starting to think about selling Storenvy, I was trying to like not work so much, and I couldn't figure out what to do other than like go to bars, because I didn't really have any hobbies. Like, for 7 years, I didn't have time for hobbies. I hadn't read any books for fun. I hadn't really made anything with my hands that wasn't in front of a computer. I didn't have hobbies. And I can't stress enough, find some ways to get off the computer and to invest in yourself and actually like have a life outside of work that you enjoy, because working all the damn time is not sustainable, and you will burn out, and you cannot bounce back from that. All of these other things we've talked about are things that you can fix if you messed up. But getting burnt out is not something that you can fix. You just have to give it time, and then you're toast. So take care of yourself in the long run. You're not going to like this one. Don't do it alone, because, man, when you do get tired and when you need a break, you have no one to fall back on. And I got to tell you, I looked for some other co-founders, but nobody popped. But I think my bar might have been too high. Knowing now everything that I would have had to deal with on my own, sitting in investor presentations, trying to give design feedback and make pitch decks and balance books and meet with attorneys and everything all in one day, it's too much. And you need somebody that you can lean on when the going gets tough, because it really, really will get tough. Kind of the advice that I would give you is just, you got to sacrifice for your company. You do. Like, it's creating something from nothing, and it's like giving birth. Like, there's a lot of labor involved, and it's painful. But respect yourself in the process. Create good boundaries for like how far you're willing to push yourself, and know what's worth giving up and what's not. Because life is short, and your work won't hug you back. I don't know if this is like super French, me saying this, or like not French at all. Feels like it's one of the two. But go easy on yourself, and take care of yourself on this journey, because it's really rough. All right, I'm going to wrap up. You're going to screw up. I screwed up a ton, but the number one skill in business is the ability to learn quickly. That is the number one skill that you can possibly have. So the faster you can realize that you're jacking it all up and quickly change course and learn, the higher your percentages are of surviving. And that's the name of the game when it comes to startups. This was all over the place, but like I said, I just wanted to kind of brainstorm and quickly shoot at you guys some disconnected thoughts. But I was really interested in like a Q&A if you guys want to stick around for that. If you have any brain busters, I'll do my best to answer them. So thanks for your time. Hello.
Okay. Hello. Wonderful presentation. I enjoyed it thoroughly. I had a question with Marketplace. When I was talking to my French VC, one of the things that he told me was, he's like, Marketplace is a very difficult business model. And he says, one of the things that I see is that people either, if you have to build your supply and demand at the same time, the likelihood is that you're going to fail. What is your perspective? Do you build I know you touched on it with your egg and chicken page, but could you tell me your suggestion of, do you build your supply first, or do you build your demand, or how do you navigate that?
The answer is it depends. And the reason that it depends is because I think you have to provide, first of all, I think you, in every case I can think about, have to accent one over the other, big time. Not necessarily just do one, because that's probably not sustainable or realistic, but you have to accent one. And in some cases, it comes down to who can you provide value to in that equation that is not the other side of the equation. So if you have a bunch of customers in one place and you can get them using like a message board to talk about hair, suddenly there's value for these people because they're interacting, they're getting their questions answered, there's there's life going on there. There's not anybody providing hair yet or whatever, So then you can introduce the supply and all of a sudden you've already got a bunch of eyeballs and people paying attention. For us, we were providing people with software as a service for online stores with no expectation or promise that there was even going to be a marketplace. The marketplace was sort of like a surprise that you get a whole bunch of more customers along with your store. But we've very much focused on the supply side first. But there's probably a Tumblr waiting to happen of how every single marketplace that we know of started out with the chicken and egg problem. I think I might have even registered that Tumblr one time and then never did it. But it sounds like a good idea. What I'm trying to say is that I think you could probably go to every marketplace that you admire and see how they did it if you're looking for inspiration.
Love that. Cheers, John. Oh, God, that's a bit loud. So you said that you weren't a big fan of metrics early on and then had 3 things that really mattered, which was a few others as well. How did you go from not really liking metrics to making them a part of how you built Storenvy? Mainly kind of like, what did you look at? Did you have dashboards and things like that?
I talked to an entrepreneur today, actually, about what we used. We used a tool called Looker that's kind of a mid-range thing. It's better than, like Chart.io and some of the things that people wind up doing. But yeah, we had to implement it, build our own dashboards. But still, like, part of me all the time kind of had my fingers in my ears because when you are like, I was in a 900, well, that's probably small for Paris. I was in a $100,000 house in Kansas City, just dreaming this whole thing up by myself. And, it's actually too big of a product for one dude to sit there and make by himself in his spare bedroom. But I always kind of had my fingers in my ears about metrics because I never felt like the product was done enough to start measuring it. Where I was like, yeah, but as soon as we launched the themes where everyone can get their own cool theme, then we should start paying attention. And I think that's a lot of people. I think we're afraid of the metrics because we know they're not going to tell us a good story. And we still got money in the bank or whatever, so let's hold off on actually pulling our pants down in the data sense and looking at the situation. But I think I got driven by investors to do it. Yeah, board members, because I knew what they were going to need to see to put money into the next round. They were going to ask these questions. And I got to be honest, some of them didn't. Some of them didn't ask the questions and they never would have. And that's one of those things where, did I really want them to invest if they didn't know how much we sucked at certain things or couldn't see it? Answer was yes, but it's still an interesting question you should ask yourself. But yeah, investors pushed us because they had dealt with other companies that were further along that were measuring those things.
Thank you for the presentation. It was very inspiring. So you said you just sold Storenvy. So what's next for you?
I was probably going to have some French wine after this. I am taking some time off Like I don't know how. I feel like that's such a predictable thing to say, but you know, I did get to the burnout stage, and I left. I decided to sell the company because I wanted to take a break, and I was just like sick of the problems that we were solving. You know, we were solving fraud and all kinds of stuff that like was not why I became an entrepreneur, was to like solve credit card fraud. But maybe it's because I've sat at a computer for the better part of the last 10 years. I'd actually really like to figure out how to take, people are doing this, but I'm interested in doing stuff with my hands and that becoming, I still am interested in, mass market consumer stuff, but one of the reasons that I'm traveling is to just become exposed to ideas that are outside the silo of San Francisco, and I'd like to see like something real world be the thing that I get to focus on next, instead of it just being like tapping things.
Thanks for the presentation. I was listening from the back, as many of us. It's striking what you just said about doing things with your hands. I was in San Francisco 2 months ago now, and I was actually a bit disappointed. I just spent like a few days there, but I kind of felt like it was very, how do I say that, a bit in the clouds, like people were not really down to earth. What's your feeling about that, since you just said?
Well, that's the reputation, is that it's an echo chamber. And, the most beautiful apps to ever be launched are all built in San Francisco, undoubtedly. And those are oftentimes the biggest failures because, it's above the head of the mass market. And, the best product doesn't win. RDO being a great example. That was the best music platform that will ever be created for the way I like to listen to music, but huge failure. Lost a lot of money, made a lot of customers really sad when it closed down. Yeah, it's an echo chamber. I think it's unbelievable for the kind of serendipity that you can have. And really the value is not necessarily access to investors, although it is that. It's like you're sitting in Dolores Park and like that guy from Dropbox that you wanted to do a deal with is just like, sitting there drinking a PBR next to you. So it's like startup sleepaway camp. But if you can, and I think to a degree what you're describing hopefully is dying because the funding market is becoming more difficult. And you're not getting like your dumb emoji-only social network funded anymore. But still, I think, I love hearing about products. I met with a dude in the back today who's doing a matching service for hair braids for African Americans. And that's not something that somebody's going to come up with in San Francisco. And there's a lot of, I guess they're not African Americans in France. But moving on. But the idea that like there's a lot of these hidden markets that people don't know about that you just aren't going to see because you're working at Facebook and everybody's just talking about the hot new TechCrunch thing. So yes, absolutely. Get out of the city, focus on something that actually matters, that changes most people's lives, not just the cool kids. Honestly, a lot of people just want to be cool. They want to start a cool company and not necessarily a useful one.
Perfect, thanks.
Thank you so much for the presentation. It was very interesting. So my question is, let's say that you have created a new product and that you have 0 customers. What would be the best way to communicate on your product and to get customers now when you have a very limited budget?
Well, what kind of product is it?
It would be like, let's say, clothes or bags being sold.
So a physical
online.
good.
Physical
Physical
yeah.
good. I mean, man, that's a really broad question because it has everything to do with where are your customers living? Like, what are they doing? Are they on social media? Are they in a specific geolocation?
Let's say it's the local market and they would be present on social media.
Well, I'm going to try to be smart here. I think the broad answer to that question is that you have to get in front of them where they already are and give them a reason to change their behavior to you versus whatever they're already doing to meet that need. So you got to get their attention, get them to pay attention, and then convince them that you're worth switching behavior over to.
Okay, so like creating a buzz, creating.
Yeah, but I mean, there's a lot of ways to create buzz that aren't necessarily going to convince somebody to use you instead of whatever they're already using. So it has to be a useful buzz. You know, we could. There's a lot of like absurd things you could do to get attention, but it might not actually like convince users and customers to start using your thing or buying it. Thank you.
Que la famille.